A valuable object disappears from a locked room. Someone inside the house knows exactly how it happened. If you enjoy intelligent mysteries built on secrets and slow-burning tension, subscribe and like. This investigation is just beginning. Detective Superintendent Edmund Rowe had barely settled into his office at Westbridge Metropolitan Police when the morning routine collapsed. The chair beneath him was still warm from the radiator, his untouched cup of black tea releasing thin spirals of steam, when hurried footsteps struck the corridor outside. The knock was sharp, urgent, wrong. The door opened before permission was granted. Constable Daniel Moore, too alert for the hour, stood flushed and breathless. Rowe did not look up immediately. He already knew the day would not be simple. "There's a woman demanding to see you," Moore said. "Claims it cannot wait." Rowe exhaled, finally lifting his gaze. "They all do. This one arrived in a private motor car," Moore added, "and she hasn't stopped shaking." That earned attention. Moments later, Lady Margaret Whitcomb entered the office with controlled composure stretched thin. She was tall, elegantly dressed in slate-colored wool, her posture disciplined, the kind learned over decades of polite restraint. But beneath it lived panic. She did not sit until invited. "The Whitcomb emerald," she said once the door closed. "It's gone." Rowe leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Gone how?" "Taken," she replied, "from a locked cabinet, inside my private sitting room." She placed a small leather case on the desk and opened it. Velvet lining, empty. The emerald brooch was not merely jewelry. It had been commissioned nearly a century earlier, passed through generations, displayed at formal court events, its value tied less to currency and more to legacy. Rowe had learned long ago that heirlooms rarely vanished without consequence. "Who had access?" he asked. "My husband," she said. "My nephew Julian Fairley, staying with us temporarily. Our maid, Rose Calder. And our solicitor, Mr. Nathaniel Crowe, who reviewed estate matters last night. 4 people. 1 locked room." Rowe stood, already reaching for his coat. "Where is the residence?" "Ashcombe Hall. Outside Northbridge." The drive took nearly an hour. Winter trees stood stripped and silent as the estate emerged from the mist, an imposing Georgian structure, respectable, wealthy, and far too quiet. Inside, the house felt guarded. Rowe examined the sitting room first. Everything pristine, polished furniture, carefully arranged cushions. The cabinet stood by the window, glass intact, lock untouched. Too untouched. He crouched, inspecting the hinge. There, barely visible, a pale thread caught beneath the lower metal joint. Fine, expensive, not household fabric. Rowe removed it carefully. "This cabinet," he said evenly, "was opened deliberately, not forced. Whoever did it knew how." A silence followed, heavy, personal. Lady Whitcomb folded her hands tightly. "Please," she said, "find it." Rowe slipped the thread into an evidence envelope. "I will," he replied. "But first, we uncover what this house is hiding." Rowe began the interviews with a rule. No theatrics, only timelines. Ashcombe Hall ran on ritual bells, trays, softened footsteps, yet the missing emerald had turned every sound into accusation. He started with Captain Simon Whitcomb, found in the morning room beside an unlit fire. The uniform was gone, replaced by a dark cardigan that still sat on him like a pressed jacket. He looked as if he had slept sitting up. Rowe noted the hands, clean nails, faint ink on one thumb, a man used to paperwork or pressure. The captain's answers arrived a fraction too quickly, as if prepared. At 9, he claimed, he was in the library reading. He stayed there until after 11. Alone, no witness, a tidy alibi that asked to be accepted. Rowe asked whether he had entered his wife's sitting room. The captain denied it with firmness meant to close the subject. His gaze slipped once toward the corridor, then returned to the carpet. Next came the nephew, Julian Fairley, who treated suspicion like bad weather, irritating, inevitable, never personal. Early 30s, trimmed beard, bright eyes, expensive confidence. He spoke smoothly about travel fatigue and family affection. He placed himself in the drawing room for a while, then upstairs rather early. The gaps were filled with charm, not detail. Rowe noticed Julian's coat hanging by the stair rail, deep navy wool, the hem slightly strained as if it had snagged. Not proof, but a mark to remember. The maid, Rose Calder, arrived pale and careful, carrying fear like something breakable. She confirmed she had cleaned the sitting room after supper and had not touched the cabinet. Lady Whitcomb kept the key. Everyone knew it. When Rowe asked who had been near that corridor, Rose hesitated. She finally admitted seeing Julian pass by and linger as if listening. Then she stopped, eyes down as though words might cost her position. Rowe saved the solicitor for last. Mr. Nathaniel Crowe waited in the study behind a stack of documents like a barricade, thin, immaculate, and professionally irritated. He spoke of estate matters with practiced neutrality, but Rowe heard the edge underneath. Liabilities, deadlines, obligations. Pressed gently, Crowe conceded the family finances were under strain. Repairs, loans, old commitments, the kind of strain that made heirlooms look like currency. Rowe returned to the sitting room alone. The lock showed no damage. Whoever opened it used a key, or a duplicate, then closed it again with care. Outside on the terrace, he noticed disturbed leaves near the stone steps, a faint scuffing trail that didn't belong to wind. He followed it across the lawn to a gardener's shed tucked behind yew trees. Inside, the air smelled of soil and old wood. Dust floated in a thin beam of light. On the floorboards lay another pale thread, almost identical to the first. Beside it, a tiny scrap of beige wool, torn cleanly, as if ripped in haste. Rowe pocketed both and stood very still. Someone had moved through this garden after the brooch vanished, careful enough to pick locks, careless enough to leave a signature made of fiber and panic. And now the investigation had a direction. By morning, Ashcombe Hall no longer felt merely elegant. It felt alert. Voices softened when footsteps approached. Doors closed more carefully than necessary. The house was learning fear. Detective Superintendent Rowe used that. He requested a private word with Lady Margaret Whitcomb in the conservatory, where winter light filtered weakly through tall glass panes. She stood with her back to the garden, hands clasped, already defensive. Rowe addressed the matter directly. The solicitor had mentioned financial pressure. She did not deny it. There had been losses, investments that failed quietly, repairs postponed, then unavoidable. Her husband's obligations, some inherited, some chosen. The estate endured, but only just. Rowe asked about the emerald. Her voice lowered. Selling it had been discussed once, years ago. It had ended badly. The brooch represented continuity, the one thing untouched by compromise. She believed that mattered. Belief, Rowe knew, was not protection. Captain Whitcomb was less restrained. Found in the billiard room, he struck balls too hard, too often. Rowe spoke calmly. The captain reacted sharply. Debts were dismissed as exaggerations, then minimized, then blamed on circumstance. He admitted to considering selling the emerald in the past, not recently, never secretly. His denial carried resentment rather than innocence. Rowe left him before anger hardened into performance. Julian fairly proved more difficult. Charm does not crack under pressure, it adapts. He spoke of family loyalty, concern for the estate, admiration for the brooch's craftsmanship. He denied wanting it, yet spoke of it with unusual familiarity. Rowe noticed the pattern. Julian wanted solutions that benefited everyone, provided someone else made the sacrifice. The maid, Rose Calder, was the weakest link and therefore the most honest. When approached again, she revealed more than she intended. Arguments had become frequent. Whispered conversations late at night. Documents passed hand to hand. The solicitor's visits had increased, and once, she admitted, she had seen Mr. Crowe near the sitting room days earlier, claiming to search for Lady Whitcomb. He had not known Rose was there. That mattered. Rowe returned to the shed with fresh eyes. The wool fragment was fine quality, not servant fabric, not the captain's dark outerwear. Julian favored deep colors. This scrap belonged to someone who dressed to disappear, not impress. Someone professional. He followed the faint impressions in the grass back toward the house, stopping beneath the sitting room window. There, near a decorative latch, was a dull smear of blue-green wax. Rowe recognized it immediately. Mr. Crow sealed all legal documents with that wax. He used it obsessively. The method fit. A spare key, clean entry, temporary removal, a hiding attempt outside, and a man who understood value not emotionally but strategically. Still, Rowe did not move yet. Pressure makes people act, and the one thing more dangerous than a guilty man is a cornered one. By evening, the house waited, unaware that the investigation had already shifted from who could to who would. The emerald had not left Ashcombe Hall, and someone inside knew exactly where it was. Rowe left Ashcombe Hall shortly after midday, not as retreat but as provocation. When pressure stalled, distance often forced errors. Guilty minds disliked uncertainty more than accusation. The train carried him into Northbridge, where streets narrowed and reputations mattered more than licenses. In a side lane off Calder Row sat a pawnbroker's shop, narrow frontage, frosted glass, and a bell that rang too loudly for anyone hoping to stay unnoticed. Rowe stepped inside. The man behind the counter was heavyset, gray at the temples, his spectacles perpetually sliding down his nose. He looked like someone who had learned long ago not to ask unnecessary questions. Rowe produced a folded valuation slip recovered that morning near the gardener's shed. The reaction was immediate. "Yes," the pawnbroker said slowly. "Early today, well-dressed gentleman, didn't stay long." Rowe asked for a description. Tall, upright, educated voice, nervous hands, kept glancing at the window, asked for an estimate, not a transaction. The man claimed he had a brooch but never removed it from his pocket. When a uniformed officer passed outside, he excused himself and left without explanation. No item exchanged. No money offered. Rowe stepped back onto the street, the winter wind cutting sharply through his coat. The visit mattered not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. A thief does not bring stolen property into public view unless prepared to lose it. The emerald was too distinctive, too traceable. Anyone who possessed the real piece would avoid attention entirely. On the return journey, Rowe reconstructed the motive. Captain Whitcomb was under financial strain. That much was undeniable. Desperate enough to seek relief, careless enough to risk exposure, but not reckless enough to pawn the genuine heirloom. Back at Ashcombe Hall, Rowe confronted the captain privately. The confession came with bitterness rather than guilt. Years earlier, when selling the emerald had been discussed, a replica had been commissioned, a contingency, a bargaining chip that was never used. The copy remained hidden. That morning, Whitcomb had attempted to pawn it, hoping for temporary relief before the situation worsened. Rowe believed him. Not because the action was noble, it wasn't, but because it was amateur. Desperation leaves fingerprints. Planning erases them. That removed the captain from the center of the crime. Julian Fairley followed next. His luggage revealed nothing. Rich colors, immaculate folding, no pale fibers, no concealment. He wanted influence, not blame. 2 suspects remained, but only one fit the method. Rowe turned his attention inward, not to people but to the house itself. The emerald was small, easily hidden, temporarily stored, not removed. Somewhere decorative, overlooked and hollow. Not the piano, too obvious. Not the clock, too destructive. Then he stopped. At the far end of the hall stood the pipe organ, silent for years, ornate, decorative, forgotten, perfect. Rowe did not search it yet. Instead, he allowed the house to breathe in false security. Let the guilty believe the trail had bent away. Mistakes follow confidence, and confidence never lasts. By evening, Ashcombe Hall had settled into a fragile calm that fooled no one. Dinner was served precisely on time, candles lit evenly, servants moving as quietly as trained shadows. Politeness had returned, not as comfort, but as camouflage. The kind people used when they sensed a verdict approaching. Rowe chose the study deliberately. Mr. Nathaniel Crowe sat behind the heavy mahogany desk, papers arranged with unnatural precision. He looked like a man attempting to impose order on something already lost. When Rowe entered, the solicitor's irritation surfaced instantly, sharp and rehearsed. "This investigation is becoming disruptive," Crowe said. "The estate cannot function under perpetual suspicion." Rowe closed the door behind him. Not loudly, not softly, just enough to mark separation. "Suspicion," he replied evenly, "is not a condition, it's a consequence." He crossed the room and placed the pale scrap of wool on the desk. Crowe glanced at it briefly. "Wool," he said, "hardly remarkable." "It matches your overcoat," Rowe replied. The pause was brief, involuntary enough. Rowe continued calmly. The same fibers had been found under the cabinet hinge. Another near the shed, same weave, same shade. Same quality, too refined for servant attire, too light for the captain's outerwear, too subtle for coincidence. Crowe stood, palms flattening on the desk. "You are constructing guilt from threads." "No," Rowe said. "From opportunity." He listed it methodically. Increased visits, private access, knowledge of debts others preferred not to name, a spare key entrusted years earlier, a man trained to see property not as memory but as leverage. Crowe responded with indignation. Loyalty, years of service, financial sacrifices made quietly. He spoke of responsibility toward the family, toward the estate, toward himself. Responsibility, Rowe noted, was often the word men used when justifying betrayal. Then came the interruption. A light knock. Rose Calder stood in the doorway, visibly shaken but resolved. Rowe allowed her entry without looking at Crowe. She spoke carefully. The night before the disappearance, she had overheard an argument in the corridor. Crowe and Captain Whitcomb. Voices low, words sharp. The word collateral repeated. The emerald mentioned by name. Crowe's composure fractured. Not dramatically, subtly. His jaw tightened, his gaze dropped. Rowe pressed not with accusation but inevitability. The brooch had been removed cleanly, temporarily, hidden, not sold. The shed was a mistake, a hurried attempt to discard evidence, not store the object itself. The real hiding place was still inside the house. Crowe denied theft, claimed protection, a guarantee against collapse, a temporary safeguard until debts were resolved. Rowe let him speak. Silence was a tool. When Crowe finished, Rowe said quietly, "Then you chose the wrong hiding place." Crowe's eyes flicked not toward the door, not toward escape, but down the hall. That was enough. Rowe left him seated, arguments dismantled by implication alone. In the corridor, Rowe stopped. He mapped the house again in his mind. The hiding place had to be close, accessible, overlooked, decorative, hollow. Something present, yet unseen. The answer had been waiting from the beginning. The house itself always tells the truth if you know how to listen. Rowe did not hurry. Rushing at the moment of certainty was a mistake younger detectives made. Guilty people sensed momentum and reacted unpredictably. Instead, he allowed Ashcombe Hall to settle into the uneasy quiet that followed confrontation. Silence, when applied correctly, was pressure. The pipe organ stood at the far end of the music hall, its carved wooden columns rising toward the ceiling like something ceremonial and obsolete. Once, it had filled the house with sound. Now it served only as decoration, respected, ignored, unquestioned. That made it ideal. Rowe approached it alone. No witnesses, no announcement. The truth did not require an audience yet. Dust lay thick across the keys, untouched for years. He ran a finger lightly along one of the vertical pipes. Most echoed hollowly when tapped. One did not. Its sound was dull, muted, occupied. Rowe exhaled once. He removed his gloves, reached into his coat, and retrieved a slim folding tool. The paneling had been designed for maintenance, not secrecy. Within moments, the decorative slat loosened. Inside, wrapped tightly in deep blue velvet, rested a familiar shape. Rowe withdrew it carefully. The Whitcomb emerald brooch caught the low light instantly. The central stone held its color even in shadow, a rich, unmistakable green framed by fine diamonds. It had not been damaged, it had been preserved, hidden, not abandoned. Rowe replaced the panel, restoring the organ to its silent dignity, then turned back toward the hall. Lady Margaret Whitcomb stood near the staircase, her composure finally eroding under strain. She had been waiting, not watching the organ, but Rowe himself. He opened the velvet cloth in his palm. For a moment, she did not react. Then recognition struck. Her breath caught sharply, one hand rising to her mouth. "It was here," she whispered. "All this time." "Yes," Rowe said, "because no one looks at what they believe is already lost." Captain Whitcomb arrived seconds later, confusion shifting into disbelief. His gaze moved from the brooch to the organ, then away again. Shame settled heavily on him, though this crime was not his. Rowe summoned Nathaniel Crowe. The solicitor entered with forced calm that dissolved the instant he saw the emerald. His shoulders dropped. The performance ended. Rowe spoke evenly, methodically. The spare key, the clean lock, the temporary removal, the panic that led to the shed, the fibers, the wax seal. The choice of hiding place close enough to retrieve, obscure enough to delay discovery. Crowe did not interrupt. When he finally spoke, it was without defiance. He admitted to taking the brooch not to sell but to secure. A guarantee against debts he himself had financed. A safeguard for survival. Rowe listened, then delivered the truth without ornament. Intent does not erase theft, and trust, once broken, does not return quietly. A constable was sent for. Lady Whitcomb accepted the brooch back into her hands, relief layered with grief. The betrayal hurt more than the loss itself. Rowe watched the house absorb the revelation. Ashcombe Hall would endure, but it would not forget. As Crowe was led away, Rowe adjusted his coat. The mystery was solved. What remained was consequence. Ashcombe Hall felt different the following morning, not quieter, steadier, as if the house itself had accepted what had happened and chosen not to resist it any longer. Sunlight filtered through tall windows and lingered where shadows had dominated for days. The air was clearer, though no lighter. Truth rarely lightened anything. It simply made things visible. Nathaniel Crowe was escorted from the estate shortly after dawn. There was no resistance, no dramatic farewell. The man who had spent years managing outcomes now walked with the posture of someone who understood that control had ended long before this moment. His pale wool overcoat hung loosely, the same fabric that had betrayed him, reduced now to a quiet, almost humiliating marker of failure. Lady Margaret Whitcomb observed from the upper landing. She did not wave. She did not speak. Relief touched her expression, but it did not remain. Betrayal by an enemy could be compartmentalized. Betrayal by a confidant lingered. It rewrote memory. Every document signed, every conversation shared, every quiet reassurance now carried a shadow. Rowe stood several steps behind her. "The brooch should never have become leverage," she said at last. "It was never meant to be currency." "No heirloom ever is," Rowe replied, "until desperation teaches people to price what should be priceless." Captain Whitcomb joined them, his presence hesitant. Gone was the defensiveness, gone the denial. What remained was exhaustion, the kind that followed prolonged avoidance. He spoke quietly of debts concealed, of pride mistaken for dignity, of silence that allowed others to act where honesty should have intervened. Lady Whitcomb listened. She did not interrupt. That alone mattered. It was not forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and that was where rebuilding began. The emerald brooch was returned to its case, though not to its cabinet. Some objects once displaced should never be stored the same way again. Trust required revision. Security required humility. By mid-morning, Rowe prepared to leave Ashcombe Hall. Constable Moore waited beside the motor car, alert and faintly impressed. "So that's it, sir?" he asked. "Recovered, confessed, concluded." Rowe adjusted his gloves before answering. "Concluded," he said, "is a word people use when they want certainty. This case is resolved, not repaired." The estate would continue. Repairs would be made, accounts reviewed, lawyers replaced. Conversations long postponed would now be unavoidable. The truth had not destroyed Ashcombe Hall, but it had stripped it of illusion. What remained would be more honest, if less comfortable. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Rowe looked back once. A grand house, a restored heirloom, a broken certainty. The pattern was familiar. Back at Westbridge Metropolitan Police, Rowe finally reclaimed the ritual the case had stolen from him. The tea waiting on his desk had long since cooled, but he drank it anyway. Warmth was secondary. Continuity mattered more. He opened the next file waiting in his tray. Another object, another silence, another truth waiting to be disturbed. Some mysteries end with answers. The better ones end with consequences and leave marks that do not fade. If you followed this case to the very end, subscribe and like. More investigations are coming. And tell me in the comments, who do you believe was truly most guilty? The man who took the brooch, or those whose silence made it possible?